What today is it's about a student's perspective. So we understand what I feel. Obviously in corporate America, we understand what Nesby goes through as far as a high school basketball coach, former NBA player, and all those things. We've understood what Mike Toledo has went through as an up-and-coming now leader in Berks County. We've heard from Senator Swank, who's also here today, and we've heard from a lot of other great people as well. So we thought today, why not bring up the students, listen to them, because the only way that we're actually going to be able to make progress is to listen to our future. So the future is here with us today. We're very excited to have them here, and I think that as we all walk away today, the one thing that we have to do is understand that we have to listen to what they're saying, and then we have to bring action. So as we hear what they're going through, let's figure out, well, how do we get the next wave of students to not have to go through those things? What can we do within our community to bring light, to shed light on these issues? That's what really today is about. I will start with this. For me, I'm from Berks County, lived here my entire life, went to school here my entire life. So I've had a lot of great times, but there also have been ups and downs. Certainly throughout my schooling career, I was subjected to a few racial words, as you can imagine. So I've been called 3 that I can remember in my life, a lot of times out of anger, where people will call me a racial slur. So in those moments, sometimes I reacted in a way which I wouldn't react now. So I understand that I've had to grow throughout my time, and I've had to understand that even if it comes from a place of hate, it's not for me to combat it with violence or anything of that nature. So I understand being called certain names, which can hurt, and it does hurt. But at the same time, I know now a way to combat that, which is much better. It's bringing people like you together for unity and talking about it, discussing it, figuring out how we can push out that hate. So I've been through that. I've been through sports, and obviously in sports, most of it is good times as well, but there were times where when I was playing basketball, the crowd chants would not be so favorable to me. So at times, people would scream out, "Where's your green card?" And something like that is obviously offensive for many reasons. So when you hear things like that from the crowd, obviously it doesn't feel great. When people use certain names, not only in school, but then outside of school in athletics, you feel like you can't escape it at times. So that's really why I wanted the students to talk about what they're going through, is because there's a lot more than just walking these hallways and having to deal with discriminatory issues. You also have to face it in athletics. You have to face it when you go over to a friend's home. There's a lot of ways that you can really be subjected to this terrible behavior. And this is not about me today, so I want to go ahead and pass it off to these students. The first student that we have here today, another Berks County, born and raised, great student, great basketball player, Kaba Mitchell.
Everyone's having a great day. Thanks for coming out today to support us and the movement we're trying to spread. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life and my story and my experiences. So, like you said, I was born and raised in Reading, Pennsylvania, not that far from here, right on 12th Street. I was fortunate and blessed enough to be able to attend a private school growing up, to get private education. And growing up and going to a private school, my experience is that most of these kids, they don't have enough connection between kids that grow up in the city and kids that go to private schools and live in suburban areas. And I think that's where it starts. Increasing the connection will allow these kids to learn how to interact with kids of the opposite race and just kids with differences. Learn how to work with them, learn how to grow with them. So I think it's very important to spread awareness, and that's the most important part. So spreading awareness is one of the most important parts. Events like this and just speaking about what we go through throughout the day and throughout our lives is very important because it spreads awareness. And a lot of my experience showed that going to school, a lot of these kids are just ignorant. what happened to us. So speaking about it and spreading awareness is very important so that these kids and also adults can learn how to change and treat people with equality.
Thank you, Kayla. Certainly appreciate that message and you having the courage to stand up here. Really appreciate you and everything that you've been through. And sorry everybody about the little technical difficulties. Next up, we're going to have up EJ, also a student, Berks County raised. So come on up, EJ.
Thank you all for coming out. My name is EJ. One thing y'all should know about me is 1, I'm legally blind. 2, I'm a trans man. And 3, I'm Puerto Rican and Jamaican. Throughout my experience in the Reading School District, I've had teachers who treated me greatly. I've had people in my life who treated me badly. I have people who jumped away from me and asked me what is wrong with my face. I have people who used me as an experiment because why not use a blind person who had cancer as an experiment? I have people who looked at me and laughed at the fact that I can be something other than white, but then again at the same time look at me and look down at the fact that I'm disabled and treat me as such because you know, the fact when I became a homeless youth and I was neglected the right to be able to be my own person at 17, I didn't get that opportunity because I was seen as blind, and as I was told, a person in my standards would not be able to take care of themselves, let alone live on their own. I've been doing so for 2 years now. I was abused most of my life, neglected, and best to believe I was called the N-word almost every day of my life. Then again, my skin is so pale, nobody would understand why that would be. Nobody would understand why this world is so messed up and has so much hatred and pain in it. How could you look at somebody and think they're less than because they have a disability? How can you look at somebody and think they're less than because they're a different color than you? That's what confuses me. I can't see you, but you can see me. But when you see me, you see a cis straight female who just happens to be Caucasian, when in reality, I'm none of those things. In reality, I'm a person who has to fight every day, who has to always show somebody that I'm worth it, that I deserve the right. It shouldn't be like that. We should be able to look at one another and see that we all bleed blood. We are all the same on the inside. We might have some differences, but then again, we're all different at the end of the day. It's not okay to feel pain or to be scared when you walk by a cop. It's not okay for you to tell your kids the only way they're going to make it in life is to go to college, because best to believe a high school, that doesn't really do much. It's just the next chapter in your life that you have to do. But best to believe, one day this world is going to be better if we all can stand as a united front and stop looking at our differences as a bad thing instead of seeing them what they actually are. It's a good thing to be different, because if we weren't different, this would be a boring world. I'm sick of the pain that everyone has to feel. I'm sick of the pain that I have to feel. When you're neglected and you're treated like you're less than, my own counselor told me that my sexual assaults weren't real. My own counselor told me that my abuse wasn't real. Being held down at 9 years old with a plier to my tongue, that wasn't real because that must have never happened. That's how I was told and taught, because a person with a disability, we can't be taken seriously. I've been on my own for 2 years now, and what I'm seeing is every day that I'm going on, people just find a way to tear me down. People just find something to make it wrong. But best to believe, if we stop seeing me as an object and stop seeing what characteristics I fit in, we can all see me as a person, somebody who's fighting and striving, somebody who has to work more than one job to make ends meet, somebody who can't just go and collect SSI, because SSI, you can't live off of that. We have to start seeing in reality there's ups and downs, but if we all stay together and we all stop fighting, because a fight isn't going to make this better. We have to stand tall and understand and listen, because once you listen to the truth, that's what you can see. We have to listen to one another, and we have to look past all the stereotypes, because systemic racism is real and those stereotypes are implanted. That's why you can look at one in fear and look at the other and just pass through. We have to stop seeing that, instead see ourselves as equals, because we are, at the end of the day, all human beings, aren't we? Have a good one.
Thank you, EJ. I think we all agree it's a powerful message. Really appreciate you getting up here and sharing that with us. Thank you. Next up, we have a student, actually from Philadelphia, but is a student here. And he would like to share his story with all of us. So if we please all put a hand together for Jazir.
How we doing, folks?
Great.
If you can hear me, say yeah.
Yeah.
If you're glad to be here, say yeah.
Yeah.
Say yeah one more time.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Give it up for yourselves. All right. So today I'm going to do, well, first I want to thank Coach Nesby and Jabbar for having me. I want to thank everyone for being out here today. I'm going to do a spoken word piece dedicated to the fallen victims of police brutality. And I believe myself to be a mouthpiece in this moment because I believe that same fear that they experienced at their moment of death, in their last moment of breathing, we as people of color and people who fear, we take in that same type of fear at their last moment. So I'm going to do a spoken word piece, and it's inspired by Stephen Clark. So here we go. When my teacher brought up the Stephen Clark shooting as incident, I could only hear accident leaving his lips. Nothing against him except privilege, bound to people who look like him. They know it like the back of their hands and still cannot see it or refuse to. Well, isn't that the exact same thing? Ain't that privilege after all? I ask myself, how long will we continue to let the ledger of our dead grow? These black bodies are no longer strangers to me. It's starting to feel like family, loved ones. And I wonder if I'm next to kin like this is an agreement I never signed up for. It was painful to watch the video because I know there would be no happy ending. As soon as I pressed play, it was almost as if I was there. I thought I'd sink to the floor. My skin turned to goose flesh each time the cop chose to yell. Every word sounded like a lynching. When he died, he did not die as the scar did matter. He did not bleed perfectly on the grass. He died human and man, all in the same breath, and still he was not able to take it back, as if to say it didn't belong to him in the first place. Like living isn't a divine right. When Stephen Clark died, he died with a name. He did not die as 3/5. Nonetheless, they saw him as animal, ready to be slaughtered. What man can wolf down 20 bullets and live? They turned his backyard into a cemetery, his body into a black hole. I am led to believe they are doing this for fun. How else to justify another cold corpse that looks exactly like me? How else to say that they've been trying to kill us for 400 years and still found not guilty? So when I say politics and black are the exact same color, with two different meanings, understand that it is not enough to march on Washington when the war is taking place at our front doors, when the desire is to repeal the Second Amendment, to appropriate gun control in the suburbs and militarize the police in the hood. Yes, we are the hopes and dreams of the slaves. That is not to say that they aren't still lynching our people in 2020. The only difference is the rope has become more malleable. They gave it a better shine, painted it black. Knots and bullets twist the same when it hugs a black body. That way, it is no longer illegal. It's just that time of the year, all year, hunting season. You be man and animal. You be centaur. You be as harmless as innocent children. You still be targeted, but be of good courage. Don't you know we come from hope-filled wombs? And we always see the light at the end of the tunnel that we built from scratch. You are the gifts that the ancestors gave. You are proof that they survived. You owe it to them. In the words of Baldwin, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in the rage almost all the time. So no, this poem has no ending until they are given a proper burial. And then I will let their names fill the space again and again and again. In the name of every one of our slain, this too shall pass. Stephen Clark, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Walter Scott, Terrence Crutcher, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Freddie Gray, Akai Gurley, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd.
Thank you, Jazir. That was a very powerful message. I really loved your passion, and you can tell that you're really in this fight with all of us. And I think everybody out here can agree that you felt that passion in his voice, and you really felt that, so let's give it up. Before we go on to our next speaker, I know I'm sweating out here. You're probably sweating as well. If you need any Gatorades or water or anything like that, you can go over to Double Eggs. They're over there, right there with the hats on. If you can put your hands up, Double Eggs. So if you need anything, please go over there. Don't just sit out here and dehydrate. Thank you. Next up, we have Andrea Thomas. She's speaking from the perspective of a parent. So a parent who had 3 young black men go through Berks County as students, and this is also going to be very hit home for some of you out here. I know my father's here today, so he feels this as well, and I'm excited to hear what Andrea has to say. Come on up, Andrea.
Hey, how everybody doing today? Not good? Good? It's good to see you guys. No one would have told me yesterday that I would be standing on this stage. I don't see myself as an advocate, but I believe I see myself as a passionate person. Alright? Bear with me, I'm a little bit nervous, but I am going to get it all out. So today, yesterday talking to Mr. Nesby, I went home to speak, and I was like, alright, very reluctantly, I've been asked many times to be there before, but I kind of shied away. But it's been hitting on my heart recently that I need to do a little bit more. I use the word legacy. I need to leave a legacy for myself, alright, and my children. So, I thought about, what should I talk about? This discrimination in school. There's so many different levels of discrimination. You know, I am an immigrant. I have been discriminated in that sense. I was a low income. I've been discriminated in the workplace. Alright? I have lived in the city. I've been discriminated here. But I think what really hits me most is that it hit home. As the young lady here spoke, she's a lady with a disability. I have a son that has a son. Alright? And I work. I'm a social worker that works with people. So I lived through a lot of experiences. So I'm going to talk about one thing today. Alright? Because I couldn't pick up on the topic. But I'm going to talk about biases. Alright? Everybody know what that is? Okay. Alright, so we have implicit and explicit biases. I'm really going to focus on the implicit biases that people have. Alright? And this is not to say that they're not correct, or I'm not putting anyone biases on the spot. Alright? But we've found that biases, especially in this climate, is now shaping the narrative of what's good and what's bad. And that narrative is now coming around black, minorities, and who is good and who's perceived to be bad. Alright? I want to talk about implicit biases because I was subjected to implicit biases when I had a son who had to go to school with a disability. And as a mother, I wanted the best for him. That's what any mother would do, right? You want the best for your child. Well, guess what? I learned about implicit biases growing up. So let's define implicit biases. So, when we talk about implicit biases, we talk about bias. It's an implicit social cognition. It refers to an attitude or stereotypes that may affect our understanding or actions and decision in an unconscious manner. Alright, and that's the key point. The unconsciousness. Alright? These biases both encompasses both favorable and unfavorable assessments and are activated involuntarily and without the individual awareness. So you don't have to think about it, it just comes naturally. Alright? Residing deep in the subconscious, these biases are different from known biases that people may choose to conceal for purposes of social or political correctness. Rather, implicit biases are not accessible to retrospection. So, I will tell you, my son has autism. He is on the higher function part of the spectrum. So when he was 3, he didn't talk. And we knew something was wrong, and we took him to the doctor, and the doctor said, okay, you have to get him evaluated. Got him evaluated, and they said, okay, he has a learning delay, and he's going to need specialized services. Okay. As mother. I was dirt poor. I was barely making ends meet. I had to work 2 jobs, but I was going to be willing to do anything for my baby, all right? And I was hoping that everybody who saw him understood that, you know, he could change the world. But apparently that wasn't the case, all right? So I had to register him for early intervention, and eventually he got accepted into a school district. Now, as an immigrant, I knew nothing about an IEP. I knew nothing about social services. I knew nothing. But guess what? I walked in, and I could feel a judgment on me. There was some bias. There was an African-American woman coming in. I don't dress well, I guess. I don't wear expensive clothes. More than likely, I'm uneducated. And at that time, I was. All right? But I could feel that when I asked for certain things from my child, their decisions and the answers I got came from an unconscious place. Then I started researching autism, and I started learning about early intervention. And it struck me. Caucasian kids get into services real quick versus an African Americans. The first few years of a person's life when autism spectrum disorder is really the relevant time for services and intervention. All right? Mind you, my baby was sick at that time. He had never had intervention services. I was told when he finally went into school, and after fighting with them, they gave him speech therapy, and then what happened was, rather than getting services, when he stimmed or he acted out, guess what? He became the troubled child. Because when we talk about African Americans, what do we do from young? And it's statistically shown. We start grooming them as criminals really early. So what is considered as acting out for another person, for us, we are troubled. Our children are troubled. Okay? So they removed him. At the end of the day, they started, as he got older into the system, they started giving him detention. Okay? At one point, I remember one exact situation where my son was gifted. He was gifted. He scored off the chart in math. And the implicit bias of this teacher couldn't believe that he did that. She said she don't think that was correct. And he wasn't supposed to be in the gifted class. Why? Because he always forgot his homework. He forgot to write in the planner. And even though I explained to her, because he has an auditory delay, and he doesn't remember that would happen. Her words in response to me was that she told him. And I took that because I was ashamed. But then I found my voice. So after the semester, I fought with the district. And they let him stay in the class, and he took the final year exam. And guess what? He aced it. She couldn't say anything anymore. This was the troubled child who couldn't do the work. But then I found my voice then. Because if I didn't find my voice then, I knew my child was going to fail. And I chose not to have him fail. That is not my job as a mother. My job as a mother is to groom him for success. So then I took on. I started recognizing what I needed to do. I was uneducated to a system that was designed to keep my son back. So you know what I did? I decided I was going to get educated. I started taking my worth and my power and learning what my child deserved. Now I'll tell you, it ruffled many feathers. I was not the most liked parent. But let me tell you, every time I went into a meeting, they would throw their titles. I will tell you that. Doctor this, doctor that, and I am lowly Andrea. But I do know when I come in here, I know what I want. I know what I should expect, and I know what should be done. And I needed to do that because, again, I needed to break out the implicit biases that you have against me and my child. You don't know us. So I stand here today scared as ever because I would never say that I would be standing here. But the conversation needs to happen. Our biases is what cause division. Our biases is that's what we call, we see black and white. Our biases is what gives us perspective of what we think is good and bad. We need to change the narrative on our biases. It comes naturally, but there's something called critical thinking or perspective. I've been learning to do that most recently. With all that's going on in this world, I want to be mad. But what is that going to get me? I see people as people. I am a social worker. We believe in dignity and worth for all. And I carry that. So I leave you with this. Go home and think about your implicit biases. Kind of like put it in perspective in what's going on in the world. And see if you added value. Was it positive or negative? Have the conversation if you can. I am not judging anyone, but think about your biases. That's all I have to say. Sorry I took so much time. Have a good day.